All right. Mark's like, my first YouTube on Mr. Hansen's channel. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. So this is being recorded for the students at home that need to pay very careful attention. And as you have questions, and as you guys have questions and so forth, on the all-important History IA, the IB History IA, it counts for 100 points. This semester, it counts for 100 points. Next semester, you're going to do an awesome job with my help and a lot of your work. And so you'll have that taken care of by the end of your junior year. So you have that's one big less thing to have to worry about for your senior year. So today is the time for the training on that. So we'll be doing that with you guys. There are some key due dates. I did give the small handout. I didn't get to time last period to go over that in great detail, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The little short sheet that I gave you, it's on the top there, Kaj. Do you see that? Yeah, it's an Anna. Okay, Kaj. Okay. Grace. Mrs. Anderson says grace. Be forgiving to people like me who make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I try to be patient myself. So anyway, it's Wednesday for you guys. Green group, it's the Thursday. I think at home we'll give them the additional day because they'll be submitting that to me by electronically. You guys, it's a printed, annotated bibliography. You can look at the sheet. It's pretty self-explanatory. You'll come up with a topic. Some of you guys are already talking about some topics. You're going to do some research. You find 5 good sources. That's a good sign that you're going to have sources to do your paper successfully. And then by annotated bibliography, it means you write 2 sentences giving sort of the gist of each of those 5 sources. It's not an onerous assignment. It's worth 15 points. Yeah. Those are like some of the easy points that students are like want to gravitate toward and have as part of their grade. Yes, question? I'm going to go through a lot of that in the training today as far as like topics and so forth. Hmm? It's going to do with history. And as we go through the training, you're going to see it needs to be, and this is the way it is for all IB, especially like the extended essay, the history IA, it needs to be something in controversy, something where there's a no clear yes or no answer. But that's no problem. You guys, this is what I'm telling you, you guys figure out what you're interested in, okay? Figure out what you're interested in, find out that there's enough sources to do research on it, and let you and I, especially me, help figure out what the question is going to be, okay? And if we need to change the question or alter the question and so forth along the way, that's okay. We'll do that, okay? Because I like how, for example, I gave the example last period. I had a student, a senior last year. She wanted to do research on how the Japanese, you're going to learn about this actually next semester, I think, how the Japanese military was really, really horrible to Korean women. Took a whole bunch of them, basically turned them into sex slaves. History calls them comfort women. I mean, it was a really, really horrible thing that took place in history. And so she wanted to do research on it. I'm like, cool. So the question initially was justice done with respect to the Korean comfort women and the Japanese military government and what they did to them? Well, as she went through the research, she's like, no, no, no. I'm like, wow, that seems pretty one-sided. So we shifted the question slightly from was justice done to was any justice done? I mean, like anything. And we're like, okay, well, they sort of apologized, but then there was all kinds of various different things that they still look bad. So we can do that. When we get your question, the key thing is, what are you interested in doing? So you'll be thinking about that. Are there enough resources on there? And then as that goes forward, is the question tailored well so that you've got something in controversy, a yes and a no, enough information kind of that lands on both sides, okay? I try and take a lot of the stress off of students on that with respect to, if you want to do something on cannibalism, eat your heart out, or somebody else's, whatever the case may be. Yes, we've got a, and it was like, why am I the first one to do one on cannibalism? No, we did have a student do it on cannibalism at sea in the 1800s. It was really interesting. Yeah, but find the topic that you're interested in. And yes? All kinds of different things. All kinds. And as we go through, we're going to see there's all kinds of stuff, and you will be evaluating those sources for their origin, purpose, value, limitations, OPVL, stuff we've been doing like freshmen. Yeah, I know, exactly. This is where the payoff comes. So you get a source that's like, well, this is a really good source, so the value is that they were like right there on the scene and observing what was going on. However, there's also a limitation because they seem to have some bias and they don't seem to know everything that's going on. That kind of stuff. Yes, and I've actually had where you can bring in something that makes your topic really interesting and unique and so forth. If you've got family sources and things like that, you'll need to do them like all, official and everything, but it does. It makes it a little bit more, okay? Yeah, I mean, we are not going to conduct like a medium sort of thing like that, but if they pass down any records that you can use as part of your research, yep. It could work. It has some reliability issues, but hello, that's what historians deal with. Okay? Yeah. Okay, now, there we go. All right, now one thing I'm going to do. Okay, write down on the thing just to wrap up the Russo-Japanese War. I got a little quick video thing that's actually kind of cool. Russia beat Japan, right? Okay, so Russia is going to have some serious... Oh, you're paying attention. I love it. You're like, Mr. Hansen. Yeah, I kind of fumbled that one. Jacob was going to go, I was going to say something. Yeah. Russia lost to Japan, right?
No. Yes.
Lost to Japan. Verb choice is very important. Lost, win, yeah, relationship. So Russia lost, and they're going to like try and shake things up in time for, that's not even the one I want you to see. Good grief. Yeah, I know, that's my thing for next period. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, there we are today. Russo-Japanese War, we're going to do the training that we're not going to get to the emergence of the U.S. That's going to be next time, okay? So here's this. Okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to put this up. Every once in a while, I'll try to find, and this guy puts together these little 3-minute history things, which are pretty cool and interesting and so forth. And he kind of goes over that, and you'll be like, I'm familiar with that. The Battle of Mukden was the big land battle that Russia lost. The Battle of Tsushima Straits was a big naval battle that Russia
Lost.
Exactly. Okay? And then coming out of that, Japan is on the ascendance or on the decline? Ascendance, exactly, which watch out if you're an East Asian or Pacific country because that militaristic things. How many of you guys are like, I like Japanese culture, it's got some really cool things? How many of you guys like that militaristic component of Japanese culture that was evident in the late 1800s and through the early 1900s where they like just take over countries and just like kill people? No, I mean, it's like, I like Animal Crossing. It's so nice and everyone's so sweet and, kind to each other unless they're playing a character and they're like using profane language. Or like my daughter, when she comes to my island, she's got an axe and I'm like, what the heck? And she tries to dig shovel holes around all my villagers so they can't move or anything like that. No, it's a different tool. Shovel, she puts the axe down, she picks up the shovel, and then my little Flo is like this little penguin's like, I can't move, because there's, you know what I'm talking about, because there's all these little holes around. It is fun. It's sweet. It's Japanese now. Japan has really focused on removing a lot of that militaristic aspects. But it was a big deal 100 years ago. All right, so let's take a look at this one. We'll play this for you real quick, and then we'll get into the training. Ready? Go.
19th century, Japanese, realizing that going to more effective and samurai swords, had rapidly modernized the armed forces.
Correct.
This modern army gave the Japanese the ability to pursue an expansionist policy. They attacked the Chinese in 1894 and took Taiwan and put Korea under their sphere of influence. They also took the Liaodong Peninsula, but Russia, along with France and Germany, stepped in and made them give it back to China. This bullying tactic pushed the Japanese into forming an alliance with the British in 1902. Meanwhile, the Russians were in search of a warm water port in the Pacific. They looked to expand, like many European nations did, into the declining Qing dynasty. In 1897, they leased Port Arthur from the Chinese and started construction of a railway line connecting it to the Trans-Siberian Railway through Manchuria. Both nations joined the Eight-Nation Alliance to defeat the Chinese Boxer rebels in 1900. that Japan should reduce their own troop numbers in Korea. Relations were then severed, and Japan declared war in February 1904. Well, controversially, they declared war after they had attacked the Russian fleet at Port Arthur. This naval victory allowed the Japanese to land troops in Korea and occupy Seoul. From Korea, the troops marched north and fought the Russians across the Yalu River and made their way into Manchuria. In July, the Japanese, with thousands of troops, laid siege to Port Arthur and their fleet blockaded the port. The Russians tried to relieve the city by sending in their Baltic fleet. However, en route, they fired at British fishing ships, believing they were Japanese warships in disguise. Nearly thought Britain into the war on the side of their ally, but they instead settled for closing off the Suez Canal to Russian ships. This forced the Russians to go around the southern coast of Africa. Port Arthur fell in 1905. Now, the Japanese were free to reinforce their position, while the Russians struggled to reinforce theirs due to the many shortcomings of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. The Japanese then pushed on land. The Battle of Mukden, one of the largest ever land battles, saw nearly 300,000 Japanese soldiers defeat 340,000 Russians and take control of southern Manchuria. Then, in May 1905, the Russian Baltic fleet finally entered the Straits of Tsushima and met the Japanese. The Japanese had a much smaller navy, but had recently been equipped with British technology. Plus, they had months to prepare for the Russian attack. The Russians' antiquated fleet was destroyed, and with it, Russia's hope of winning the war.
Let's talk about the torpedo boats.
The treaty was signed as the Russian Revolution of 1905 was spreading across the nation. In June, sailors in Russia's only remaining strong fleet, the Black Sea Fleet, joined in the rebellions by leading a mutiny on the battleship Potemkin. In the peace deal, Russia withdrew from Manchuria and recognized Korea as part of Japan's sphere of influence. Korea was fully annexed by Japan in 1910 with no diplomatic issues. Japan also took the southern half of Sakhalin Island
You got that?
and gained the lead over Port Arthur. The war was the first
Sakhalin
time a modern
Island.
European nation was defeated by an Asian nation, and it cemented Japan as the dominant Asian power. Their empire building wouldn't stop until after their defeat in World War II.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Russia was humiliated. Their domestic problems only deteriorated, and the war gave the future Central Powers of World War I the confidence to attack Russia as they saw it weak.
There you go. Yeah, there's a lot. That's going to be a real big, important prelude to the to World War I. Okay, now let's get to this because we're not going to be doing any more on the Russo-Japanese War. We're going to do some serious training now. Are you ready? Training. We already talked about the short sheet and so forth. That's fairly self-explanatory. Make sure you have that ready to turn in, within 2 weeks' time?
September 23rd.
Yeah, and so the at-home folks are going to submit that to me via an email, which is good, okay? And any questions as they go along. I've given you 2 packets, which are very, very important. If you look at this one very briefly, we're not going to go over it right now. It is a sample paper that was given as part of a training for IB history teachers as to what does a good paper look like. This one got 24 out of the 25 possible points. So I like to give samples to students of what does a good paper look like, so you use it kind of as a template when you're putting together yours. And as you go through here, you're going to see, obviously there's some stuff that I'm like, I want you to do, like put a picture on the front of yours on the first page, okay? And as you go through, you'll see that there's 3 different sections. We'll talk about that in your training, and I wanted them to put the word count. You'll see this person uses what's called the Chicago style of citation with the footnotes, for the citation, as opposed to MLA, which you put the little parentheses. Either method you use is fine, just be consistent. I had more students go with the MLA just because they're used to doing that, like in papers for Mrs. Rao's class, which is fine. The only reason I mention that is because a lot of times students are coming up, unlike this student here, are coming up into the 2,200 word limit. That actually is, sometimes people are like, they want to write more. It's like, so what difference does it make? Well, the words in your citations don't count toward your word count. Like, well, so that's cool. If you use Chicago style with the little footnotes at the bottom, computer programs that do the word thing and so forth, they don't count those. If you use MLA, then you have to actually physically go through your paper and subtract from your overall word count all of the words contained within the parentheses. You're like, that's weird, but that's just a little piggy point. Okay, so this has got some good examples of some things. It's a good paper, and your paper could look quite a bit like it. and receive really nice scores and so forth. Okay, so there is your sample there. If you want to have more, I actually had a senior, current senior as a junior, when they were putting it together, they wanted to see more samples, and so they got on the internet and Googled and found other samples of papers that they wanted to look at. I think this is sufficient. If you want to look at more, that's fine. The goal is to get you into an excellent paper. Okay? Now, let's turn our attention to this packet handout. That's what we're going to spend the remaining part of the period going through and training you as best we can in the time that we have on how to write a very good History IA paper. Okay? First, the packet contains quite a bit of stuff, and I'm not going to go over all of it. It's all there for you to look at. You'll see as you go through, especially when you get to like the third and the fourth page and so forth, oh my gosh, Mr. Hanson, you have written all kinds of little notations on the side, because the official paper is what IB provides, the official deal here. But when you're actually wanting to know how to focus in and make your paper really well, that's where my little side notes and so forth are very, very important. Sometimes I know I look at some of the IB documents and go, wow, they could have summed this up in one page, what might have appeared actually in 5 to 10 pages, right? So for example, the first page, it's really nice. It's got all sorts of really interesting stuff. But look, here's the highlight. Halfway down, underline. This is 20%, okay? It's a really cool project. You're going to be doing research on something really, really interesting. If you don't do research on something interesting, it's not my fault. It's your fault, okay? Because you have to do research on something we're actually doing in class, like, the Russo-Japanese War and so forth. No, you can do it on something that fits in the historical context, and there's so many different things. I mean, it's like, I'm looking at some of my students. You could do something having to do with history on, like, animation. I mean, Marvel's been around for so many years. That would fit in perfectly as a topic for a History IA. All right, I mean, it's like, I can just, like, it's cool, right? Did I give the example how, I can't remember if it was an extended essay or a History IA, a student did one on Star Trek. Did I talk about that in this class? Okay, anyway, thank you. Okay, it's like, I only say it in one class of all the 4 classes, and I repeat it 5 times. Lovely. Yeah, you're like, oh, you're getting to be an old man. All right, so make sure the topic is something of interest to you. Now, traditionally, it's going to be 20% of your overall IB history thing. But last year, what was the History IA count for as far as their IB score?
16.
Well, they didn't do any of the essays, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, in May because everything was shut down. Counted for everything. The History IA paper that they did counted for everything. Did they do a good job on it? Yeah, were they well trained? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were 2 students that turned in a paper to me for the first draft, which you guys are going to be turning that in to me when by?
Whoa.
When's your first draft due?
23rd.
Thank you very much. The 18th of what month? Where did you get that information? It is exactly right on the front right corner of the paper. It's due on the 18th.
That says September 23rd. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So you got until the 18th to get the first draft done. And then I had a couple of students last year who, when they finished it, their first draft, their junior, it's like, this is not good enough. And they worked on it some more before they could even have an official meeting with me. And they did a real good job on their second first draft. And then I had the official meeting with them and gave them some tips and so forth, and they put it into a final draft, and it was a good final draft. And they got the certificate for IB history. And actually, those 2 students who were also going for the IB diploma, they both got the IB diploma on the basis of success in here and their other classes. So, yeah, this is all very, very good. Who knows what the future is as far as, like, how things are going to be. I mean, I don't know. It's like up and down and up and down. And so, we're putting you in the best position possible beginning today. Okay, quick question.
I have a sort of non-question.
But make it quick.
You think the whole coronavirus thing is worse because it's an election year?
No, I just think it gets complicated because everything gets politicized in an election year. I think it's serious to begin with, so there you go. That's my comment. If you want further comment, we'll bring it up maybe another time. Okay? But everything becomes complicated in an election year.
Yeah.
Because then you got finger pointing, like, did you do good enough? Or did they do good enough? And da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And if you're, like, running for re-election, part of what happens is people are assessing you on how you did in that job as to whether or not they should keep you. And so that's one of the things, is like, how has President Trump, among all the other various different people involved in government and so forth, handled the corona situation? Okay? So it's a legitimate question. It's very good. All right, now flip over to whatever this, the back of the page, 85. You can see I underlined some stuff on the back of that first sheet. Okay, do you see what I underlined there? Teachers should read and give advice to students on one draft of the work. This is IB really telling everyone, especially teachers sometimes, don't hold the hand of all the students along the entire way. It's primarily the students who are doing the work. A lot of the emphasis on me comes at the beginning with the training. At the beginning, when I sit down with you individually, beginning in a couple of weeks, and we go over your particular topic and come up with a question, okay? And at the stage where you turn in a first draft, and it's a pretty darn good first draft, and then I can give you some feedback. And I will have that meeting with you early next semester, okay? And then guess what you're going to get next semester?
More work.
You're going to do the final draft second semester. But actually, here's the good news. It might not be that much more work. If you do front load, you do a great job on your first draft, and then I come down, sit with you, and I'm like, well, tweak this, tweak this, tweak this. And you're like, well, that's not that much. That's the conversation I have sometimes with students. They actually clear the deck for themselves. They do a lot of the stuff up front, so they don't have to do as much second semester.
So are you actually supposed to be like working on it from now until the end? Like, are you supposed to be?
Yeah, here's how it's going to be looking. All right, so you got this initial assignment, which is like the annotated bibliography. You're thinking about your topic, right? And then you're doing some research to find out, is there enough sources? And then you turn that in, we set up a meeting, and we come up with a question, okay? All right, that's the initial, and start researching now. Start researching now. But the months of like October and November are going to be very much research, writing down your notes, getting things organized, and then ultimately writing your first draft and turning that into me right before Christmas break. Okay? I did want to mention, so that's kind of what it's going to look like. I did want to mention to you, can you rely on other people to help you along the way,
No.
even if I'm only having one official meeting with you in like January of next year? Yes, thank you very much. You're so intelligent. Yes, peer review. And sometimes when we have enough like time and so forth in here, we'll actually set up some peer review opportunities in class. We're a little bit short on time and so forth, but find students. I mean, you do already peer review in English class, yes? Some, yes, 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 and it can be very good. It actually helps. How many of you guys are like, I really like handing my paper over to somebody who's very critical? As opposed to, I really like handing my paper to somebody who's like, good, that's so nice, and doesn't give any really constructive criticism.
I like the segment.
You like the second one? But then when you hand it to the person who grades it, and they look and go, avoidable error, avoidable error, avoidable error, you know, and you're like, So, you'll want to, okay? You'll want to have your paper in the best position possible. I don't have enough time in the day with everything that I've got going on to give the kind of review that every student needs on their paper as it's going along. It's not possible. I teach 4 different courses. I teach 6 out of 8 periods, right? It's not possible. Now, am I going to give your paper a really thorough review? Heck yeah, your first draft. And if it's a good first draft, I will give you that feedback when we have a meeting in January, okay? But am I going to be the only one to look at your paper? You look at it carefully along the way, and have other people do that too. Okay, does that make sense? And that will help that process along. This should be a very positive process, and I think by the end of this review and as we go through it, you can be like, I can do this. This isn't too bad. And I'm going to be appreciative at the end of my junior year that that's going to be in the bank. It's done. I don't have to mess with it. You're going to be still working on IAs and extended essay and other kinds of things in your other classes as seniors, but you'll be wrapped up here in your junior year, okay? For my class. Yeah. You'll want to talk, and you'll have conversations with all your various different IB teachers as far as what are the different things you need to do. I'm just telling you, very early on because we're getting started on it. Because we can. Okay? We can. All right, now, turn to page 3, that's 86. Now let's get into the details of as far as what's in the paper. Because you can see, there's the template, right? Jacob's like, I'm so ready. There's the template, and there's Mr. Hanson's scribble marks all over the place and underlining and so forth. Okay, so here we go. We got the historical investigation, also called the History IA. Here's a couple things to think about. Some of them I already mentioned. What is the time frame that I suggested that maybe you should think about having your topic from?
23rd.
The time frame. Actually, I'll ask Emily because I know she's got an interest in ancient stuff, and there's problematic, and so that's already an issue identified. She knows it, I know it. Within the last 100, 200 years, does that seem like a good time frame?
No.
What, you want to do? No, it's okay.
Oh,
If it's-
I thought we were talking about her. Never mind.
No. If you wanted to do something ancient, it's a little bit more problematic as far as finding the sources.
Yeah, last 100, 200
Yeah.
years.
How about if somebody wanted to do something on 9/11? The attack of 9/11, which occurred this day,
Oh, gosh.
19 years ago.
I didn't even realize
The tip-off is this for history, or even for extended essay for a history topic. It has to be later than 10 years ago. Or I guess earlier than 10 years ago, I guess.
Why?
Because they want it to be historical. They kind of said, well, we don't know, we don't have an opportunity to learn as much about history until we get maybe 10 years removed from that. I remember my grandma used to always say, well, I don't know about what's going on right now, but when the history books are written, although, are there history books being written right now about the presidency of Donald Trump? Yes, because there's actually a big market for people wanting to read books about the presidency of Donald Trump, so they're writing those books and they're coming out right now. Very interesting primary source documents and so forth. Will people still be saying the same things 10 years from now that they're saying right now? Will we have the benefit of additional knowledge? Generally, make note of this, we have the benefit of additional resources and so forth to understand more about what happened in the past, sometimes the further we move from the past. Although, if you want to know about, like, what was your grandfather or grandma's life like growing up and so forth, you're going to have to talk to them now. You can get better information now. Although, if I want to know what it was like for my dad going out of high school, joining the Navy, I can't talk to him anymore. I have, which was really cool. But he also wrote letters to his family, and we have all those letters, so I can read those letters as a research document. Okay? All right, so there you go. Paragraph right in the middle, students choose their own topic. I've stressed that. There has to be sufficient sources. I've stressed that, so that's very clear. The last paragraph before we get into the heart of it, the investigation is an opportunity for students to demonstrate the application of their skills and knowledge to a historical topic of their choice. Cool. Something that they're interested in. Emphasis must be on specific historical inquiry that enables the student to develop and apply skills of a historian. So let's get into the details. What are you going to be doing as a historian, writing this paper, which is no more than 2,200 words, which is actually going to go by pretty quickly. Anybody know how big is the extended essay that you're doing? It's kind of like this. Anybody know?
1,500.
No, it's bigger. 4,000. Okay? And for these papers, you generally want to come in just under. You never want to go over, because actually in the training they say if they're reading your paper and it hits 2,200 words and you got a bunch of stuff written beyond that, they're only going to grade you up to 2,200 words. And so all the points you thought you were going to get in the last sections of your paper, you're not going to get. So there's a real emphasis to be efficient, but not too efficient. I would say have your paper, for me, come in just under 2,200 words. So like 2,100 to 2,200 words overall. If it's much less than that, it's probably not good enough. If it's much over, those words aren't going to count. So you need to be a good editor. Okay? All right, let's go to, yes, quick question. I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff, so are you ready? Let's you and I talk separately about that. Figure out what you're interested in. See where it comes up at some point in time in history. Do a little bit of research. Okay? Take some time, do a little bit of research, and kind of play around with it. There's so many different things that are acceptable. I had 2 students do, like, on the Charles Manson murders, 2 separate history IAs. on Charles Manson murders. That's historical, it's serial crime and so forth. It worked. They both did really nice history IAs on that. Okay, now let's look at Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. There's 3 sections of your paper. Look at this at the bottom of page 86. Section 1, Section 2 on the back, and then Section 3. You can see that's a very critical component of this training because I've got all kinds of scribbly things written on the margins and underline and so forth. That's the gist of your paper, okay? It's broken out into different word targets. You don't have to hit exactly 500 words, but you want to hit thereabouts. Okay, for that section 1. If you flip over to the next page, you can see 1,300 words for the investigation. That's the guts of the paper. And it's only 1,300 words, actually, so you want to hit close to that. And then for the final part, section 3, the reflection, that's roughly 400 words. Now, on your paper, you're going to, when you have each of the different sections, you'll put the word count in there. So you know and I know how many words you use in each of those 3 different sections. You can see the number of marks or points. Marks is just a fancy IB word for the points. Obviously, the first section, 6 marks. That's cool. The second section, 15 marks, up to 15. And then the last section, 4 marks. It adds up to a total potential of 25 marks. And if you're wondering, well, what does it need to really be? The last 3 pages of your packet are the criteria of how you hit each of those different word mark things. They literally call it a mark scheme. Your goal is, for each of those ones, we may not get to it, your goal is to look at the last part. Let's say you went to the last page, right, for the reflection, up to 4 points. You want to hit somewhere 3 to 4. And look at all the stuff that I underlined there. That's the kind of thing that you're going to want to have for that section. The big chunk there, up to 15 points, those are the kinds of things. Coherent, effectively organized, good range of sources, well-developed, different perspectives, reasoned conclusion. Those are the kinds of things you'll want to have in that section in order to get those top points. Okay? Let's talk about that first section then. In your paper, you will only call it Identification and Evaluation of Sources. It's a really boring title, but that's going to be the title of everyone's section 1.